Behind iron doors, one book was hidden for what it dared to reveal. The Book of Enoch describes no angels, but a universe inhabited beyond the earth.
I was lifted above the earth, and I saw layered heavens, each one inhabited by living forms. I saw beings that carry light within themselves, without burning, without being consumed.
We are living wind. We have never known the stillness of solid matter.
I have guarded these pages all my life. Come. Come, follow me, and I will show you.
Behind some iron doors, in the Ethiopian city of Axum, a manuscript has been resting under armed guard for centuries. For over 1,000 years, armed men have guarded this leather-bound volume, as if it held something far too dangerous. Most people alive today have never heard the complete contents of that book, lost to the modern world. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible at the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD. Church leaders declared it dangerous, inappropriate for the faithful, and ordered it to be completely erased from existence. For 17 centuries, it vanished from Western Christianity, as if those pages had never existed among us. But if that text was as dangerous as they claimed, the inevitable question remains, what did it really say? What you are about to hear is not a legend, but rather what the text itself describes in a language older than the Gospels. In 1947, archaeologists were exploring the caves near Qumran by the Dead Sea in Judea. Among the hidden scrolls for 2,000 years, they found 11 copies of the Book of Enoch buried together. There were more copies than most of the books that did manage to enter the Bible that we read in our churches today. 11 copies of the same book, hidden in the same caves, reveal a community that revered it as authentic sacred scripture. The Qumran library contained hundreds of texts, and Enoch appearing 11 times shows the weight it held in that community. That discovery forced specialists to confront a question that for generations they had preferred to avoid. Because the Book of Enoch does not only speak of angels, watchers, and the fall of celestial beings to earth. It also describes other worlds, details what inhabits them, and dares to name what those beings know. And the fragments that speak of those worlds are not hidden in dark or marginal corners of Enoch's work. They are found in the full Astronomical Book, chapters 72 to 82, and in the section of the parables. The Astronomical Book describes a solar calendar of 364 days, divided with astonishing accuracy. This calendar divides the year into seasons and sunrises with almost mathematical precision, much like a clock. Enoch's solar calendar clashed with the lunar calendar of other Jewish groups, and that tension also unsettled many. The parables occupy chapters 37 to 71, the very heart of everything Enoch claims to have seen. The oldest physical copies of these passages are fragments in Aramaic, catalogued as 4Q209. Alongside them appears another brother fragment, 4Q211, both rescued from Cave 4 in Qumran. Today, those fragments are kept under custody at the Israel Antiquities Authority in the city of Jerusalem. And they are not late medieval copies, as many assume when they first hear this story about Enoch. They date from sometime between 200 and 100 years before Christ, older than the entire New Testament. That these passages exist in Aramaic 2 centuries before Christ shatters the idea that they are a late medieval invention. Scholar Joseph Milik spent decades working directly on the Qumran fragments at the École Biblique in Jerusalem. Milik identified these sections as some of the most technically detailed of all ancient religious writing. In his critical edition from 1976, he pointed out something that he found deeply unsettling. The astronomical precision contained in those chapters was not something a shepherd or a peasant could simply invent. The numbers were too consistent with one another, and the geometry of the text seemed too deliberate to be casual. Milik dedicated much of his life to these texts, distinguishing religious poetry from a cold, precise record of data. Florentino Garcia Martinez, working on the same fragments at the University of Groningen, reached a similar conclusion. Those chapters, he concluded, were not religious poetry or vague imagery. They were, in fact, observation reports. The fragment, catalogued as 4Q211, describes the movement of celestial bodies in a very singular way. It does so in terms of fixed intervals and repeating cycles, the language an engineer would use, not a poet. An ancient poet filled the sky with thrones and battles. Enoch, however, fills it with intervals, cycles, and measures. And the text does not read like someone trying to guess, but rather like someone recording something right in front of them. And here is what separates this document from everything you may have heard before about the Book of Enoch. This is not speculation disguised as scholarship, nor a free reinterpretation of poetic and ambiguous imagery. It is what the text literally says, preserved in an Aramaic older than the Christian Gospels themselves. And it is cross-verified through several completely independent manuscript traditions. There are the Ethiopian copies in Ge'ez, carefully guarded in the sacred city of Axum in northern Ethiopia. The main manuscript is kept in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, the most revered sanctuary in all of Ethiopia. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark of the Covenant is guarded there, hidden forever from the outside world. Even today, an appointed guardian dedicates his life to safeguarding those texts, not allowing any stranger to approach them. There are the Greek fragments from Axum, preserved for over a century in the city of Cairo, Egypt. And there are the Dead Sea fragments, now kept under strict control in the city of Jerusalem, in Israel. 3 distinct lineages, 3 different languages, 3 different centuries of scribes who never knew each other. And yet, the content is the same, and that level of coincidence between isolated traditions is not a mere coincidence. Scholars analyzing manuscript traditions have a precise word for that phenomenon. They call it corroboration. It is the same word used in courts when 3 witnesses, questioned separately, give the same version of events. Each tradition was born in a different corner of the ancient world, and yet all repeat the same names and the same regions. 3 languages, 3 continents, and centuries of copyists form a unified description of an inhabited universe. The universe described in these passages does not start or end on our planet, and that is the point that changes everything. Enoch claims to have seen far beyond Earth, and he asserted that he left it written down with extraordinary care. According to Genesis, Enoch was the 7th patriarch from Adam, said to have walked with God and then was taken away. The text begins this way in chapter 40 of the parables. Enoch is lifted above the surface of the earth. There he is placed, and the text uses a word that translates as stationed at a very particular observation point. From that point, he can see multiple heavens at once, like a lookout surveying from a high watchtower. Scholar George Nicholsburg, emeritus professor at the University of Iowa, dedicated his life to the rigorous study of Enoch. In his famous commentary Hermeneia, published in 2001, he translates this section in a way that surprises. He describes not one heaven, but a layered structure, each layer home to various forms of created life. The concept of layered heavens exists in various cultures, but seldom features unique inhabitants at each level. Nicolsburg is extremely careful with words, and he avoids calling those beings angels in the traditional sense. The Aramaic establishes a distinction that translations into English and other languages often erase without realizing it. It differentiates between saints serving before a throne and the native inhabitants of each sphere. They are not mere visitors, they are residents who belong here, and that difference changes everything. A messenger passes through a site while a resident is born, lives, and truly belongs to that world. British theologian Margaret Barker studied the Jewish temple traditions prior to Christianity in depth. She argues that precisely that residential distinction is what made the cosmic sections so threatening. A theology built on a single God and a single creation cannot easily absorb a text about populated worlds. A multi-floored heaven, each level with its own inhabitants, contradicts the notion of a single creation and center. Barker defended that argument in her book, The Oldest Testament, published in 1988. She wasn't discredited or refuted. They just stopped inviting her to major conferences on the topic. But the text of Enoch does not stop there, and what follows is even harder to fit into any known theology. In chapter 60, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved complete passages that the West preferred to abbreviate in silence. There, Enoch describes a very concrete world that he calls, with a precise expression, the place of the living luminaries. Scholar Ephraim Isaac produced the most widely used English translation of the Ge'ez Ethiopian text in 1983. Ge'ez is a liturgical language few speak today, making Ethiopia a capsule that preserved what was once lost. Isaac warns that the Ge'ez word used here for luminaries is not the same as the one used for stars or angels. It is a word that implies beings that carry light within themselves, not beings that merely reflect it outward. The distinction is physical, not spiritual, making it uncomfortable. They aren't metaphors of holiness or moral symbols. In that passage, Enoch is simply describing biology, the biology of creatures that never inhabited the earth. The beings of that place do not generate heat in the way that fire produces heat, as the text describes carefully. They create something unique, which the narrative calls, with surprising flair, living radiance or light, filled with life. A being that emits light without burning resembles the bioluminescence we study today. And the ancient scribes who copied this passage for centuries understood the term well enough to preserve it. They kept it intact, without translating or softening it, through three completely separate linguistic traditions. Torleif Eldvin, a Norwegian scholar, worked on fragments of Enoch at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in the 90s. In a paper from 1997, Elgvin pointed out this specific passage as something truly anomalous. He noted that the biological framework implied in the Ge'ez vocabulary had no parallel in ancient Jewish literature. His article appeared in a specialized journal, and no major theological publication echoed it. What most modern readers ignore is that there is still a third element in this cosmology of Enoch. That third element speaks of specific named regions, not vague spiritual planes or symbolic realms. Chapter 77 describes what a translator called, precisely, a geographical study of the inhabited heavens. That translator was Michael Knibb, a professor at King's College London. author of the reference-critical G.E.'s edition. Nib published that edition for Oxford University Press in 1978, after years of work. According to his reading, Enoch names 4 cardinal regions beyond Earth, each with very distinct characteristics. The northern region contains what the text calls the stone of cold, a substance or an environment of strange nature. During the 20th century, most scholars treated that stone of cold as a simple, purely metaphorical image. The northern stone of cold is described as a site where cold itself seems to have substance, body, and physical presence. The eastern region contains what translators render as the source of the waters that are above the sky. The source of the waters of the east evokes an origin of waters located above the visible sky, beyond the clouds. The western region contains the place of the setting of the great luminaries, a technical designation and nothing poetic. The southern region has a passage that, according to reports, has disturbed more than one researcher. It describes a region of living wind, inhabited by beings that do not possess what the text calls the stillness of matter. Think of it as a building inspector classifies structures. Enoch does not describe the sky in general terms. What Enoch does in reality is draft reports of zones, like someone documenting a previously unexplored territory. Each region has a category, a physical property, and a class of inhabitant that corresponds with that same environment. North, south, east, and west, 4 cardinal points, but projected upwards towards a map of worlds and not of countries. It is a zoning document written in the 3rd century before Christ, for a universe that science barely maps. And then comes the part that most translators dispatch in very few lines, almost in a hurry to leave it behind. Chapter 43 describes how Enoch is shown what the text calls the names of the lights of heaven. To those lights, Enoch neither worships nor fears. He catalogues them, like a naturalist ordering previously unseen species. They are individual designations for specific luminaries, and each one appears linked to a function and its own population. Scholar James van der Kam, from the University of Notre Dame, is one of the foremost authorities on Qumran and Enoch. In his 2012 book, The Dead Sea Scrolls Today, van der Kam observed that those names follow an ordered system. Each name encodes a role, an origin, and a governed domain, as if responding to a very precise internal logic. Van der Kam did not claim that those domains were real physical worlds, but he admitted something very revealing. He said that the system was too organized to be mere adornment. Someone designed it, and it was not simple decoration. Émile Puech, the French epigrapher from the École Biblique, worked alongside Milik on the Qumran collection for years. Puech made a separate observation about this chapter that many overlook, but which is frankly astonishing. He noted that the Aramaic roots used for the names of the lights do not appear in any other known ancient Jewish text. They are unique to the Book of Enoch, meaning they were not borrowed from any pre-existing tradition. They were created for this document and only for it, something no one does when simply inventing a mythology. That is what someone does when recording a system they found and need to document with the utmost accuracy. People don't invent a private vocabulary for the already known. They create it when no word captures what they witnessed. And here is where this entire story becomes even stranger than it already was, bordering on the truly inexplicable. In 2017, researchers from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena published a finding. They were studying the atmospheric dynamics of gas giants, enormous planets that orbit stars outside the solar system. Gas giants lack solid ground, and in their atmospheres, winds can swirl for centuries without ever stopping. Their data described planetary environments where sustained and organized atmospheric circulation could persist over time. The study suggests that in those worlds, complex structures could exist without needing a solid surface. The article, led by atmospheric scientist Nicole Lewis, did not mention the Book of Enoch at all, of course. There was no reason to do so, and yet the environment it described coincided in a way that sends chills down the spine. A world of organized, persistent, and structured wind systems, exactly the southern region that Enoch described. Beings in constant motion within the wind. This is how Enoch painted them, and how science envisions gaseous life today. The coincidence is so specific that a writer from 300 years before Christ had no scientific framework to invent it. In 2021, a team from the Carl Sagan Institute at Cornell University published another unsettling study. They found chemical conditions in Venus's upper atmosphere that could theoretically support some form of microbial life. For decades, Venus was seen as a barren hell until its upper atmosphere revealed unexpected complexity. They would be organisms that would never touch a solid surface, suspended permanently in the layers of clouds. Sarah Seeger, from the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has shaped how NASA searches for life today. Her work on atmospheric biosignatures has influenced how missions observing distant exoplanets are planned. Seeger warned that such life would have to be radically different from anything we know here on our planet. Searching for life on another world pushes us to envision beings of gas and light, completely alien to our earthly forms. It would not carry the stillness of matter in any significant physical sense, always floating without weight or solid ground. And the text of Enoch, in its chapter 60, employs exactly that same phrase to describe its inhabitants of the south. That phrase has lingered in the manuscript for over 2,000 years, waiting for someone to grasp its true meaning. If you asked someone from 300 BC to imagine life in a gas world, they would likely envision a dragon. What Enoch delivered, on the other hand, resembles much more a field classification than a fable or an ancient myth. That such precise coincidences fall right on these same passages is, at the very least, a riddle hard to ignore. If the content was so precise and so ancient, the question changes not what Enoch said, but why someone wanted to silence it. And here, the narrative becomes frankly disturbing, because the suppression of these chapters has a documented history. The Council of Laodicea, in the year 364, formally removed Enoch from the list of approved scriptures. That was the foundational moment, but what came afterward was a directed effort against the cosmic sections in particular. Jerome, who produced the Vulgate, the official Latin Bible, around the year 400, dismissed Enoch in a prologue. In his preface to the Book of Genesis, he described it with disdain as the ravings of a fantasist before the Great Flood. With a single dismissive phrase, Jerome made it so that entire generations would stop taking the Book of Enoch seriously. Augustine, in his work The City of God, wrote that Enoch's accounts of other inhabited regions were unacceptable. He argued they couldn't align with correct theology and should never be taught to the faithful. These were not casual rejections. Jerome and Augustine were the two most influential scholars of their time. They were the two most authoritative voices of the early church, and when they spoke, all of Western tradition listened. And what both chose to suppress were not the parts about fallen angels, which continued to circulate in other texts. The rest of the book, about fallen angels and giants circulated and fascinated for centuries without major scandal. What they decided to bury was the cosmic study, the other worlds, the inhabitants, and those cold reports of zones. R.H. Charles, the Irish biblical scholar, produced the first major critical English translation of Enoch in 1906. Charles acknowledged in his introduction that the astronomical and cosmic sections were the oldest core of the entire text. He called them of pre-Maccabean origin, meaning even older than the oldest portions of the entire Qumran library. He didn't suppress them completely, but he added so many brackets and warnings that most readers skipped them entirely. Sometimes you don't need to burn a text. Just surround it with doubts until no one dares to read it. The final effect was the same. Jerome's rejection did the cultural work of turning Enoch into something suspicious. Augustine's condemnation, for his part, did the institutional work of expelling it from classrooms, councils, and seminaries. And the result, over 1,500 years of Western Christianity, was that no one had to explain the cosmic study. It simply ceased to exist for the West, argued into nothingness by the two men in whom most trusted. They were the two men entrusted with deciding what God had said and what he had meant in the scriptures. But the Ethiopian Orthodox Church refused to obey and preserved the complete text without cutting a single page. For over 15 centuries, they have read it continuously, generation after generation, in their temples and monasteries. While the West erased it, Ethiopian monks copied it by hand, again and again, protecting every word from oblivion. For the Ethiopian Church, Enoch remains scripture and is still part of their Bible with recognized authority today. Their version contains passages that do not exist in any known Western translation, either ancient or modern or official. These passages detail the specific behaviors and environments of the beings Enoch claims to have encountered. They also describe the specific knowledge that those beings possessed in each of the inhabited regions he visited. In 2019, a European documentary team sought access to the restricted Axum archive for their production. The authorities of the Ethiopian Church acknowledged receipt of the request, but access permission was ultimately denied. That a request to consult a religious archive is denied proves nothing dark, but it raises legitimate questions. Part of that correspondence was shared at an academic congress held in 2021 before other experts. The presenter was scholar Lauren Stukenbrook from Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, a specialist in Enoch. Those documents indicated that the archive contains material that has not yet appeared in any published edition of the text. Stukenbrook himself pointed out, with the measured language of academia, a huge gap in the Western study of these texts. He stated that the full scope of the Ethiopian tradition of preservation had not been adequately explored by the West. He submitted a research request, but they said access had to be coordinated through ecclesiastical channels. That coordination, according to his own words in 2021, had still not been completed, nor seemed close. The doors of Axum did not open then, and as far as is known, they remained firmly closed to the outside world. However, there were researchers who managed to approach these passages through completely different channels. A scholar linked to the Schoyen collection in Oslo worked with fragments of Enoch unrelated to the Qumran library. This private collection is among the largest globally, and in 2018 he started publishing analyses of those passages. The work was preliminary and promised a continuation, a second article that was announced but never appeared. A promised article that never appears does not always hide a mystery, but it leaves a gap that curiosity cannot fill. The institutional page of that scholar no longer includes Enoch among his active lines of research today. Now, it is important to be very clear at this point, to avoid falling into exaggeration or easy fantasy about the subject. No one is claiming that the Book of Enoch is a literal travel guide to confirmed extraterrestrial civilizations. The text is ancient, its language is full of layers, and every translation necessarily involves making certain decisions. But what the text describes through 3 independent manuscript traditions is simply difficult to explain. They were scribes who had no reason to coordinate their copies over 17 centuries and 3 languages. And yet, it coincides with patterns of modern planetary science with a precision that should not be possible in that era. A writer from that time did not know other planets, nor their atmospheres, nor exoplanets, and yet described just that. The cosmic sections of Enoch are not vague or dreamy, and they do not resemble the diffuse language of dreams at all. They use the same neutral and factual tone that you would use to describe a bus route or a train schedule. It is the tone of someone recounting what they saw, not what they expected, feared, or imagined. What they saw was recorded calmly, like notes taken, not with the fervor of someone crafting a revelation. The more these chapters are examined, the less they feel like a dream and more like notes taken while gazing at the sky. Scholar Lauren Stuckenbruck states that Enoch's cosmic material most resists symbolic interpretation. This means that when scholars try to read it as a simple metaphor, the text itself refuses to cooperate with them. The details are too specific, the categories too precise, the vocabulary too technical and too firm. It is too consistent to be an allegory, and that same relentless specificity is, at its core, the real problem. Because you can easily dismiss a vision, but you cannot dismiss a well-ordered taxonomy with the same ease. Visions are subjective and change with the dreamer, but a report with physical classifications is something very different. And a catalogue with named populations, region by region, no longer belongs to the slippery terrain of human dreams. A taxonomy arises from observation and comparison. It cannot be invented from nothing, but builds on what has been seen. Enoch saw something, whatever it was, and left in writing what he saw, with names, categories, and well-defined properties. And those who decided what counted as scripture resolved that those specific chapters had no place among their pages. Still, the fragments remain there, waiting in silence. 4Q209 remains under control in Jerusalem. Alongside it rests fragment 4Q201, both kept in controlled storage in the same city. The manuscripts in Ge'ez continue in Axum, behind those same iron doors you have already heard mentioned before. The Greek fragments from Akhmim have been in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo since their discovery in 1886. They contain the cosmic passages in a third independent form, another voice that repeats the same astonishing testimony. Anyone can verify that these fragments exist. They are catalogued, photographed, and described in academic publications. Scholar John Collins from Yale Divinity School has worked on the texts of Enoch for 4 decades. In his 2016 book on apocalyptic imagination, Collins made a statement that many prefer to forget. He wrote that the cosmic sections of Enoch are the most systematically ignored portion of all ancient Jewish literature. He found the neglect surprising and, with care, avoided labeling it as merely accidental or casual. The text that Enoch wrote describes a universe that is not empty, but inhabited in regions that he dared to traverse. He describes what the inhabitants are made of and what they know, with the certainty of one who has walked among them. He catalogues 4 inhabited zones with the precision of a surveyor and with the serene calm of one who has truly been there. There are beings that carry light from within themselves, illuminated by an inner source that no star lends them. There are beings made of living wind who have never known the weight of solid ground beneath feet they may not have. And there are the named luminaries of chapter 43, each with an assigned domain and an irreplaceable name. That vocabulary has no equivalent in any other ancient writing, as if it were born to describe something unprecedented. For centuries, Europe considered the Book of Enoch lost, convinced that only loose references and rumors remained of it. It is worth remembering that it was Scottish explorer James Bruce who returned this forgotten work to the eyes of Europe. In 1773, Bruce brought back 3 copies of the Ethiopian Enoch from Ethiopia to the continent. And it is said that of all the regions described, it was precisely the south that most deeply disturbed him. This book was preserved for centuries by people who took it so seriously that they guarded it with their own lives. And it was buried by others who found its implications incompatible with a faith built on a single inhabited world. And that, at last, is the answer to the question with which everything began. Why was such a text declared so dangerous? They removed it not for mentioning fallen angels, but because it depicted a cosmos their theology couldn't contain. The zone reports remain archived. The inhabitants that Enoch named still have names, and the doors remain closed. And those iron doors of the Church of Axum, which have withstood 17 centuries, remain closed to the world tonight. If the mysteries history buried captivate you like they do me, subscribe, and let's keep opening doors together.